This is Fred Beck from Fred Talks Fighting. I'm joined by Joe McCoskey, the CEO of North America's Dazn. Joe, it's good to finally chat to you. I believe this is our first ever interview on my channel. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, followed your rise with a keen interest. So congrats for all the success.
Thank you. That's it. You've seen a lot of the channel then? You've seen a lot of the interviews.
Well, listen, when we're in the celebrity crossover fighting space, you have to follow it, and I do. And yeah, we've seen you come through and rise over the last couple of years. So congrats for all of that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It does mean a lot. So let's go straight into it. What do you think it says about Misfits boxing, the fact that all of its own pay-per-views predominantly come from Misfits rather than Matchroom or whatever other promotions there are? What does that tell you there?
I don't think that's strictly true. I think we have a pretty good selection of pay-per-views from what I'd call traditional or core boxing, and from crossover boxing with our Misfits relationship. Look, clearly there's been a couple of high profile UK pay-per-views from Matchroom that have unfortunately fallen foul of doping incidents in the last 18 months or so. That sort of slowed down the number of pay-per-views that we've offered in the UK, but we've got a strong pay-per-view business in the US and a growing pay-per-view business in core boxing in the UK. For us, I think we approach pay-per-view a bit differently to other boxing broadcasters in the sense that we try not to use pay-per-view too regularly. We want there to be real subscription value. The sort of engine room of our business is the subscription relationship that we have with large numbers of boxing fans and crossover boxing fans. And I think if we were to overuse pay-per-view and have too many pay-per-view events asking customers for more money on top of a monthly subscription, people would quickly grow tired of that. So I think we're quite selective in how we use pay-per-view and when we use it. Um, and listen, crossover boxing presents opportunities for pay-per-views occasionally. We've had a few with KSI. Obviously, got the big one coming up on October the 14th, a double header. Traditional boxing does too. So we'll use pay-per-view in both crossover and core boxing as and when it makes sense.
Well, I think is it 3-1 so far? So you got the Jake Paul show and then the two Misfits shows for KSI. And I guess the next KSI show as well. And then
No,
their
yeah,
Canelo
but we've
block,
had
I think.
we've had several Canelo pay-per-views. We've
I'm
had
sorry, I'm being from the UK predominantly, not from America, from the UK.
yeah, well, our business in the UK is quite nascent. We've made the decision with both the Anthony Joshua broadcasts we've had in the UK to make those subscription events. Other broadcasters would not have done that. There's many reasons for that. Obviously, as we try and grow our business, it's key that we engage a relationship with subscribers, and using events like that as subscription events rather than pay-per-view events is important. To get to your question, I think that Misfits is delivering us great events, and so some of those have been on pay-per-view. And KSI has a pay-per-view level stardom. There's a demand for his content, whatever that content may be, and we've made the decision to put KSI fights as pay-per-view events, and we've done that successfully as we have with traditional boxing events. So I don't really keep account of what the promoters are bringing to us relative to each other. They're different products serving different audiences, with different sort of context and nuance to all of it. So I don't think it means anything that there's been more from one promoter or less from another. There's many factors that go into that.
Yeah, that's all. I completely understand. But KSI Tommy coming up, is that the zone's biggest show in the UK out of the whole year so far, KSI Tommy?
Potentially, I think some of the hardcore boxing fans would be frustrated
Yeah.
by me saying that, but I think in terms of on a pure commercial appeal basis, given the scale of the audiences and what we know from the numbers we see with KSI, yeah, previously, numbers that Tommy's done in other fights, the success we had recently with Jake Paul and Nate Diaz, for example, it's got the potential for sure if we promote it right to be our biggest ever UK show commercially. There's different metrics to use right between different shows. Is it purely a money thing? Is it a number of buys, volume thing? Is it a cut through into mainstream media? There's different ways to look at how big an event is. I think one of our biggest events to date has been Taylor Serrano in New York. What was that? 2021, sort of 18 months, 2022, sorry, almost 18 months ago. Was it the biggest commercial fight we've done? No. Was it the biggest event in terms of excitement and media coverage and what it meant for women's sport and what it meant for equality in sport. Yes, depends which way you look at it. Purely commercially, money wise, I think the doubleheader on October the 14th has the potential to be right up there as one of our biggest events ever. So yeah, it's got that potential for sure.
Yeah, I'd say I guess you got the commercially and then PR wise, and I guess yeah, numbers wise by far I think you got the Logan Paul, Dylan Dennis, and then obviously KSI Tommy is massive.
Mm,
Is it at all a
mm.
worry for you that if KSI does decide to retire, and obviously he's a Misfits guy that sells pay-per-views, for them just how long does the DAZN, it's quite personal, so I don't want to upset anyone, but how long does the DAZN Misfits relationship last if KSI does decide to retire? Obviously he's a big pay-per-view star for DAZN.
Well, I think it's a good question. You touch on sustainability of the scene, of the crossover boxing scene. I think it's really important that we find other protagonists and other stars to come through and, frankly, to become pay-per-view level stars. What I think's been really interesting for us in the sort of first 8 or 9 events we've done with Misfits and X Series is that the audience is really engaging in some of the storylines and the different talents. There are names in there that a lot of people in your audience wouldn't have heard of 18 months ago who are now commanding big audiences on social and on broadcast for us and are, driving buying decisions around pay-per-view cards or subscription cards. It's really important that the scene is sustainable beyond the likes of Jake, Tommy, KSI, Logan. I think what Jake's done is take his brand into a completely different space, which is really, really impressive. I think KSI, he wants to stay in the sort of crossover boxing scene for the moment. It's important we find other people in the UK and in the US to back that up and add to. I completely agree with you that it won't last forever. These guys fighting, we need to find other premier talent in that scene to keep the business alive. And as long as it is alive, we're going to keep investing in it because it's really good business for us.
And how do you go about finding a new star? Because we've had nearly 10 Misfits shows, and it still seems predominantly KSI is the pay-per-view headliner. How long will do you think it'll be until you guys find another
Well,
pay-per-view?
I think how long's a piece of string? I think also
Yeah, it's
maybe,
difficult to judge.
it's the job of the promoter is to go and find us talent and to find us matchups that the public care about, right? We then market those matchups as best we can and broadcast it in high quality and obviously make sales around it. I think, look, we're finding different ways to operate and make good business in the crossover boxing space. I think there's different types of crossover boxing as well. I think Jake Paul, Nate Diaz is a very different kind of crossover boxing to KSI, Tommy Fury. Those two worlds may coincide at some point. I'd like to think they will. But look, it doesn't reveal any state secrets, but it's important clearly for us that we have our promotional partners at Misfits working and scouring the scene to find not only fighters but also matchups and formats. I think the other thing, formats. Tag team boxing has really worked for us. People find that really interesting. The invention of new formats and new ways to entertain and to slice and dice this thing is important as we seek to keep the business profitable and keep the scene vibrant. Yeah, it's a shared effort, I think, between us and the talent themselves, and also ultimately the promoters whose job it is to find these things.
Certainly. I guess it's more the promoter side of thing. I guess job to find it. I'm talking about Jake Paul. Obviously, for a few weeks back when I saw you at their event. How come there's no promotion for Misfits, the Prime card at Jake Paul's fight?
Listen, I don't want to get into that. There's some commercial sensitivities around sponsors and competitors with Prime that I don't really want to get into. Ultimately, that show was a great success. It was one of our biggest ever audiences on the US platform. It was a strong performance in the UK. It had an audience around the world. Commercially, it was a very successful night for us and for the fighters and the promoters. And listen, it was a great success. As I say, a slightly different scene to what you'll see on October the 14th. Not a million miles away, but in my mind, quite a different product to that. And listen, I think it was a great success. And we're very happy with how it all went.
I'm not trying to upset anyone at the zone. I'm only bringing that
No,
up
of course. No,
conversation,
no, it's
but
not. It's not. I don't think it's a
it's because
DAZN
of the
issue at all.
conversation that
Actually,
happened on Impulsive when Logan Paul and Jake Paul
yeah,
were
for sure. And ironically, that was very good promotion for October the 14th, wasn't it? So it's funny how these things work out. But look, there are when you're putting on an event of that scale, there are always going to be commercial sensitivities that perhaps aren't obvious to the outside world, to the watching public. I think part of my job is managing those various interests and We don't always do a perfect job, but we try our best to always do a balanced job and a fair job. And I think, listen, that's some of the context of that decision.
Yeah, that's completely fair enough. One of the other questions I got, which I find quite curious, is there some sort of maths equation of how much you value a fighter at and their worth and their kind of draw power? Is it how do you
Mm.
judge how much a fighter's worth, how much you need to pay a fighter and a fighter's value? Do you judge it in
Well,
Instagram,
listen, I mean, look,
YouTube?
ultimate, yeah, it's a really good question. I think, I don't want to bore you with the specifics of the sort of
No,
data
bore
sets
me,
and
Joe.
algorithms that
People
we
are
use.
curious. I never asked that before.
I think there's not a consistent way of doing it, right? There are lots of considerations when you're putting on a traditional boxing event or a crossover boxing event. There are many, many different sort of angles that we have to consider it from. There's obviously our core business of subscription and keeping people engaged with their subscription product. We want to make sure there are a regular number of events. The date on which an event falls hugely determines its value. For example, you wouldn't put a UK pay-per-view event 10 days after an Anthony Joshua pay-per-view event in the UK with another set of fighters. It wouldn't make sense. You'd want to spread those out and you want to justify the cost to the subscriber over a longer period of time. You want to retain the customer so they're staying around for a longer period of time. You want to get the balance right of giving them enough content to maintain their subscription with the sort of carrot of keeping them on the platform, know that there's more and more good content to come. So if a date is proposed in a suboptimal window, we'd always try and push it back, and we'd be willing to pay more in some instances for an event that happens in a different window because it has better economics for our business. Then there's market value, and that's the ultimate one, really. If a fighter can get paid $100,000 to fight on competitor platform A, and we offer him or her $50,000, they're not going to take that deal. So you have to be obviously aware of market conditions and market activity. Um, and you weigh up ultimately a fight and a fighter within the broader offer of a show. Very often, or more often than not, you're buying not an individual fight, you're buying a night of boxing or a night of events. And you look at it and think, do we think this show, if we were to pay $500,000 for it or $300,000 for it or whatever the number is, do we think we can make money on this show? Is it strategically good for our business? Does it position us in a certain way? So you've got commercial and strategic interests. So I think and it's never really one size fits all. You have to approach each product in consideration of all those different things, which are often nuanced, show to show, event to event. And we have a team of people whose job it is to do that, myself included. I manage that team, and we make decisions. Again, we try and get it right. We don't always get it right, but we're pretty good at it. And yeah, that's part of my job.
Well, every other kind of crossover boxing promotion or broadcaster, they've all fallen apart just because of the amount they're paying fighters. So it looks like Misfits in the zone have got a spot on, seeing how well it's done so far.
Well, I think. Look, we're doing well with it. We're definitely happy to be in the relationship with Misfits. We're very happy to be in the relationship with KSI and everyone around him. We obviously come to it from a slightly different angle. We're a much bigger business. We've got a much bigger boxing business beyond crossover boxing. We've also got a much bigger sports broadcasting business beyond boxing. We're one of the world's biggest sports broadcasters, and to operate in this space, I think you have to have um, an eye for the long term. You can't come in and just do three shows and see if it works. If it doesn't, you abandon ship. I think that's bound to end in one way. We've got the sort of size and scale and experience and teams to be able to activate and commercialize these events in a quite successful way. And I think that is part of a success we've had. We're not newcomers, and we know what we're doing in the broader context of sports broadcasting. Um, that's definitely part of it, but we definitely appreciate competition. I think sometimes people think that we wouldn't want any competition in the space, or we wouldn't want other activity in the space. Frankly, competition reflects the fact that there's a public demand for this stuff. If there was no competitors trying to do this stuff, then you'd have to question, are we the only people sort of believing our own and drinking our own Kool-Aid, if that makes sense? So we're really happy with it. We're happy with the space that we got back into recently, and we're very happy with the business that we're building around crossover boxing and Misfits.
When you go, I mentioned Kingpin there, so I'll just talk about them for a second. When you did bring Kingpin onto the zone, was Mams, JJ, Misfits, were they upset by that at all? Bringing another, I guess, a competitor onto the same broadcaster?
No, they get our business. I think they increasingly understand our business. They understand that we've got to serve our customers with great content. I love working with those guys, but our contract doesn't require them to be happy with every single decision we make. Clearly, they're our partners, and we want to make sure that they are happy partners, and we're in a happy, functioning professional relationship, which we are. But sometimes you have to obviously not every decision that your partners make is going to be um, you know, to your interest. But these guys get business. They understand it. I've always been impressed by how much he understands our business and understands and appreciates our considerations. Mam's the same. Calla and Nissa Stalin the same too. So no issues on that front.
Okay, that's fine. I was quite surprised when it did happen. Obviously, the show was very, very good. But when you see people on Twitter or people on YouTube, they're kind of talking about the longevity of the whole Misfits boxing. You don't really get that for other promotions like Top Rank or Matchroom saying, "Oh, how long is Matchroom boxing going to last for?" But you do
Mm.
get a lot for Misfits. How long do you think it'll be
You,
until
you do actually you do actually get that from Matchroom.
you
Eddie
really?
gets a load of abuse saying, I think Eddie's probably 6 years into his journey in the US. He's keeps for a couple of years he was being told he wasn't going to last, and then
Oh yeah,
suddenly
but
he's doing
that's
the
in the
biggest
US
shows.
market. Yeah, yeah. But like with Matchroom boxing
I
in the
think I think there's a lot. I think boxing fans are, and I don't mean to insult them. They're extremely vocal about the sport, and they actually understand the sport much more intrinsically, in the business of the sport, much more intrinsically. It's such a bigger part of the making of events. It's not like a Liverpool fan has to worry about the Champions League final happening because Manchester United and Liverpool's promoters can't agree commercial terms before the game can go ahead, right? Boxing does have that unique element to it. So I think as a result, boxing fans are very well educated on the business of boxing. And therefore when they have an opinion on it, they express it very vocally, far more vocally than I think other sports fans do. So you're bound to get criticized. And I think one of the criticisms that hardcore fans would make of crossover boxing is that it's only a flash in the pan and it's going to last for 5 minutes. And as soon as KSI is done with it, it's going to die. And um, as soon as KSI fights Jake Paul, that's the end of it. Clearly, we don't agree with that. The reason we don't agree with that is because we look at sports consumption amongst younger people and we recognize dramatically changing behaviors. Your generation, and you're unfortunately several years younger than me, um, you behave and consume content very differently to how I did growing up. When I grew up, there were two or three, four channels on TV that we would watch. There might be one football game on midweek on free to air television, Champions League on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, for example. That would be what everyone at school watched. That or something like the OC or an entertainment show. And as a result, you could concentrate an audience much more easily. Now, your generation have grown up with the internet since you were awake as a human being. You've been served with huge amounts of entertainment content, and how you're engaged and how your interest is kept is very, very different to how mine was engaged 20, 25 years ago. So, um, as a result, we have to take risks and educated, calculated risks on what's going to engage this generation. We're learning all the time, like every media organization is. We have to evolve and we have to back ourselves to make this thing sustainable. Clearly, we do because we've invested in it for an initial 5 year period. We're sort of a year into that now, just under a year into it. And we're very confident in all the metrics we see, the data we see, that there's going to be a lot more legs in this thing. So I look at the criticism. I think it's constructive to do it. We as a business have sought out feedback. You may see us after a show tweet, let us know what you thought on the broadcast, on the talent team, on the commentary, on the marketing we put out. What do you think about the video content and the sort of films we put out around an event? We want that feedback. I try and filter out the sort of abusive stuff because that's not particularly constructive. But the stuff that actually has got merit and legs, however it's delivered, whatever tone it's delivered in, it's important to listen to that. And I think it would be very dangerous for media organizations, particularly those that are seeking to engage younger fans, which most media organizations should be and are. It'd be very dangerous to bury your head in the sand and ignore it and think, oh, it's just Twitter nonsense. There is value in some of it, and it's important that you refine the bits that are value and take them away and think about them. So that's what I try and do with my team quite a lot is to listen and to adjust on the go where we think the criticism or the feedback is valid and constructive.
That's fair enough. It's quite good when the company, I guess it's become more regular nowadays that companies pay attention to what the customers are saying, and it does prove to
Well,
work.
I think you have to be. I think if you're an airline, and everyone says your food's rubbish, or the entertainment system's crap, or the flights are always delayed, as a business serving
Mm.
consumers, you've got to listen to that and go, why are we not doing it as well as our competitors? Why are they so angry about this? And I think we're in a different context. We have the opportunity to listen very directly. That's what I love about social media. It's a very quick way of realizing what the general mood is on anything, on a news topic, on a business, on a product. So I think it's very valuable as long as you can put a hard skin on and take a bit of abuse every now and then from
Mm.
angry boxing fans.
Ignore all the comments, just like swearing and kind of spiffing off random rubbish. There's three more events and Misfits this year, as there should be, I think. But next year, do you think
Mm.
we're going to see Misfits events kind of monthly, or do you think it'll be like every
I'd
2 months?
like to, yeah. I think the more that we can do in an economically sensible way for our business, I think we'll want to do. If we're doing shows, we're confident they're going to make us money and make the fighters money and make be good for the fans. We're not going to put out sort of tat. I'd like to see more events internationally.
Hmm.
We're looking at that. Obviously, Dazn's a very global business. We have a global platform that carries lots of content, including lots of boxing. We've got big businesses in countries like Japan and Germany, Italy, Spain, Canada, obviously the US. Um, there's lots of countries where we have a really core established presence. We call those our core markets. I'd like to see more events in those countries. So I'm talking to the sort of teams in each of those countries to look at opportunities to do that. That will definitely help us add to the number of events. But then also the UK and the US, where Misfits has primarily started, definitely want to do more. You obviously need great fights lined up and presented to us by Wassman and by Mams and Co. And they're very bullish on it. They want to do more. So I'm very confident we do more events next year. Yeah.
Mm. I guess the UK is probably predominantly the stronger market, I guess, as we've seen for the last few shows. But then also you got the US as well, which Misfits kind of wants to get more involved in. But other countries wise, can you name some other countries that will likely see Misfits in next
Well,
year?
I think we'd look to do it initially around markets in which we have a really established presence. The Wasserman guys, the Sauerland brothers, have a long history of working in Germany in boxing. Their family has a heritage in Germany. They
It was
they
meant
know
to
the
be a show
space
in,
over
in
there.
Berlin. In Berlin, sorry to interrupt. It's meant to be a show in Berlin end of July, wasn't there? But they all got called off. In
No, that
Ibiza.
we talked about it. We didn't get that one agreed. But look, I think Germany's definitely a market we'd look at.
Okay.
I think we've got a big business in Germany. We have the Bundesliga rights in Germany. We've got a big soccer base in Germany, and our boxing content has already always worked quite well there. So I think as we go internationally, we have to look at, especially in this space, what are the specific local strategies? You know, who are the big German influencers? Who are the big German musicians and artists who want to get involved in this space? So the brief that we've given Misfits and particularly Kala and Nissa is go and find us opportunities to expand. Go and bring us those proposals, and when you do, we will look at them positively because what you brought us so far is working and we like it. So look, we are absolutely in the market for more and more shows. I'd like to do more in the UK, more in the US for sure. Definitely more in the US. I'm confident that Logan's involvement on the 14th of October will really uplift our presence in the US from a Misfits and Next Series perspective. Excuse me. And then after that, in next year, we'll look at it and we'll try and take Misfits on tour.
Yeah, less shows in the UK, more as well. I like the traveling part of it all. It's more fun. The UK shows like, oh, it's in England again. When you got the America shows, like, okay, that's sick.
Yeah.
The
And
little trip.
you're young enough to still enjoy traveling for work. I think you quickly grow out of that. In five
Really?
years' time, you'll be much more cynical than you are now. But we all go through that phase, Fred.
Oh, okay. But what happened to the reason I brought the Berlin show, they had a big plan, Misfits release. They posted it on their socials. They were going to go to
Mm.
Berlin, Ibiza. Everyone at Wasserman was
Mm.
very, I remember talking to the team at Wasserman, media, everyone was very excited for the Ibiza show.
Listen, yeah,
Bro, you broke a lot
it,
of
it,
hearts when you called off the Ibiza show. I mean,
yeah, I broke my own heart. I don't think we called it off. I think that was sort of a suggested, proposed schedule. Look, we'd love to go to. I think Ibiza makes a load of sense for a Misfits show. For obvious reasons, midsummer. There's a ready-made audience to sell out an arena or a pool party with a floating ring or whatever crazy ideas Mams is going to have about it. We'll get something like that done, I hope, and hopefully next summer we can be doing this interview live around a pool in Ibiza rather than remotely.
yeah, okay, that sounds exciting. But for yourself though, what countries can you name now which you'd keenly kind of propose to box in next year?
Well, I think we nothing to name and announce now, but I think we'd approach it looking at our existing businesses. Where are our businesses strong? part of the reason that the Misfit stuff has worked so well in the UK and the US is because we have established boxing audiences there. We have an established brand. People associate our platform with fight sports, so it's easier to sell and introduce them to the product. As I say, we have huge businesses in Germany, Italy, Spain, Japan, Taiwan, Belgium, Luxembourg, Canada, the US. We're adding more and more markets. We announced our launch in France last week. We're now live in France. Obviously, we have a global product, but we have major investments in all of those countries I've just listed. So where we can find shows and fights and cards that make sense in those countries, they're the ones that I think are going to be the most attractive to us, given our existing base of customers there. Not to say we won't go elsewhere, but clearly we want to leverage the fact we've got big audiences in certain countries, and we can, yeah, have a head start really by going into those countries and not trying to build from scratch.
The Philippines, the Soul Pappy, I guess that's an example. He was set up.
Maybe. I think we need to get into what Salt Pappy, where Salt Pappy's audience skews. I don't know if he's particularly skewed to the Philippines. I know he comes from there. We'd have to get into those specifics with the Misfits guys. But let's see what we get promoted, what we get presented with by the promoters, and I'm sure you'll be on a plane traveling to more Misfits events next year. So I'm confident we deliver that for you.
Abroad. That's how we like them. Overseas. I don't know. It feels more like proper work when you're abroad, rather than when you're in
Yeah,
the
I
UK.
understand.
Oh, here we go, going to
Yeah,
Manchester again.
yeah.
That's great, Joe. I thought you spoke quite well there. Anything else you want to add before we end off?
No, listen, I appreciate the support. I think we're very excited about the Misfits adventure we're on. It's obviously very different to traditional boxing. I think the role it plays in sort of give breathing life into sport is really interesting. It's not going to be to everyone's taste, but I personally think as a media executive looking at sport, I think sport has to embrace these formats and these new ways of engaging sports fans, the next generation of sports fans. If we don't, and we try and serve the same product to your generation, I think we risk losing fans. So we're going to continue with our core investment in core sports product like boxing, like traditional football and tennis and golf and all other sports. We do that on a global scale in a serious way, but we're also going to try and test formats like this and try and apply these learnings to different types of sports. So I think Misfits is quite innovative in that sense, and I'm really happy that we're so involved in it. We're very happy to be where we are and looking to build into 2024 and beyond. But right now, very focused on October the 14th. Huge opportunity, as you say, to deliver one of the biggest events in Dazn history.
Certainly. Awesome. That's great. Thanks, Joe. That's perfect. Thank you.
But thanks, Fred.